Johnny Carson was the king of cool on TV, charming presidents and Hollywood legends with ease. But even the king of late night had his limits. Some guests pushed him so far he had to grip his mug just to keep from snapping. What could make the smoothest host in history secretly see red? Let's pull back the curtain. You'll be surprised. Bob Hope. You'd expect two comedy titans like Johnny Carson and Bob Hope to create late-night magic. Instead, it was more like a Cold War. Off-screen, Carson's feelings for Hope soured into something bordering on contempt. What triggered it? Hope's rigid, old-school reliance on cue cards and pre-scripted routines. For a master of improv like Carson, every Hope appearance was torture. Hope's team would deliver topics and jokes ahead of time, turning Johnny from host into glorified cue card holder. Hope's segments felt less like sparkling conversation and more like forced marches through a forest of corny one-liners. It didn't help that Hope rarely strayed from the formula. Johnny loved a guest who could riff, roll with the punches, and turn a dull story into late-night gold. Hope just wanted to pitch his latest special or plug another charity telethon. Never mind if the audience was cringing at home. Off-air, Johnny described interviewing Hope as talking to a giant promotional machine. Carson tried to be professional, but you could see the tension. A clenched jaw, fake laughs, glances at the clock. In the end, the only surprise was that Johnny never snapped live on air. But in private, if anyone made Johnny want to throw a haymaker, it was the legend who refused to play ball. Joan Rivers. Early on, Johnny Carson saw Joan Rivers as his late-night heir apparent. He gave her big break, championed her on the show, and let her guest host The Tonight Show dozens of times. Their chemistry was undeniable until the day she went behind his back. When Rivers signed a deal to host her own late-night show at Fox, she didn't call Carson first. She didn't even warn him. The news blindsided Johnny, and the betrayal cut deep. On air, Rivers had always been brash, electric, and sometimes chaotic. Her humor matched Johnny's, but her style could clash with his desire for control. Off-air, Carson saw her move as treachery. The fallout was volcanic. Carson banned Rivers from The Tonight Show for life. He refused to take her calls, never spoke to her again, and made sure no one at NBC would touch her for decades. For Carson, this wasn't just a professional split, it was personal. There's no question that, for years, just hearing Rivers' name was enough to make Johnny's blood pressure spike. If ever there was a guest who made Carson want to put a fist through the phone, it was the comic he once called a friend, Wayne Newton. Johnny Carson was famous for his barbed jokes, but with Wayne Newton, things got dangerously real. Carson had a habit of ribbing Newton's flamboyant image, calling out his high voice in glossy Vegas persona, sometimes veering into personal territory. At first, Newton took the teasing in stride, but as the jokes piled up, so did Newton's resentment. The feud exploded backstage when Newton marched into Johnny's office, slammed the door, and delivered a chilling ultimatum. If you ever make fun of me on your show again, I'll take you out back and show you what being a man is. Carson, not known for physical confrontation, was visibly shaken. The incident rattled him so much that he toned down the jokes, but the chill never thawed. Carson went out of his way to avoid Newton as a guest, knowing one wrong word could bring real fists flying. If ever there was a guest who made Johnny feel like swinging, it was Wayne Newton, the singer who turned The Tonight Show into a near-cage match. Mr. Rogers. How could anyone hate Mr. Rogers? The truth, Fred Rogers was the ultimate anti-Carson guest. Johnny thrived on wit, wordplay, and gentle roasting. Mr. Rogers floated through interviews with pure sincerity and zero tolerance for sarcasm. Every time Rogers appeared, Carson's usual charm was blunted. His one-liners bounced off Rogers like ping-pong balls against a church window. There was no chance for comic tension, no lively banter, just long, earnest monologues about feelings, childhood, and the importance of kindness. Carson would try to steer the conversation back to laughs, only to be stonewalled by Rogers' gentle gravity. It was late night's answer to water and oil. Fans noticed Johnny's discomfort, watching him fidget, force a smile, and wish for a commercial break. Rogers never meant any harm, but his style left Johnny feeling trapped and powerless. Not hatred exactly, But if ever there was a moment Johnny dreamed of tossing his cue cards in frustration, this was it. Charlton Heston. Legendary actor. Charlton Heston entered the Tonight Show studio like Moses descending from the mountaintop, weighty, self-important, and ready to lecture. Carson, who valued fast-paced banter and quick wit, found himself stuck in slow motion every time Heston took a seat. Heston's grand old Hollywood style was all long speeches and self-serious gravitas. He'd drone on about classic epics, politics, or his latest cause, never letting Johnny slip in a joke. The interviews became a test of patience. Carson's signature humor died under Heston's relentless sincerity. Worse, Heston's outspoken political views, particularly his leadership of the NRA in later years, clashed with Carson's more centrist style, bringing awkward tension into the studio. Off camera, Carson reportedly described having Heston on as a chore. If there was ever a guest Johnny wanted to hit the eject button on, literally and figuratively, it was the actor who took himself far too seriously for late-night TV. Chevy Chase. Some guests stormed The Tonight Show with egos so oversized they practically needed their own dressing room. Chevy Chase, hot off Saturday Night Live, was the original late-night showboat. While audiences loved his deadpan humor, Carson saw a brash, self-important rival with little respect for tradition. Chase's sarcastic edge cut through Johnny's smooth hosting style. He'd interrupt, talk over Carson, and drop barbs that weren't just jokes. They were thinly veiled digs. Worse, Chase seemed to believe he was already the king of late night, never showing deference to Johnny's legacy. Carson hated the dynamic, and off-air he described Chase as one of the few guests who truly rubbed him the wrong way. Their on-camera exchanges turned icy, with Johnny barely concealing his irritation. When Chase left the stage, Carson was visibly relieved. If he ever wanted to punch a guest for pure arrogance, Chevy would have been top of the list. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a guest, he was an event. But with that fame came chaos. Sinatra arrived with an entourage, disrupted production, and even stormed Johnny's monologue uninvited just to make an entrance. For Carson, who valued control and rhythm, these moments were pure sabotage. Sinatra was notorious for acting like he owned the set, often breaking the unspoken rules of late night. He could be dismissive, make demands, and expect special treatment, sometimes even pushing Johnny to the edge of his own patience on air. One famous moment saw Sinatra barging in on Carson's opening routine, turning the night into a power struggle. Behind the scenes, Carson bristled at being overshadowed and disrespected by the chairman of the board. For all their mutual showbiz respect, the truth was, if Carson had a fantasy guest boxing match, Sinatra would have laced up the gloves for round one. Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters was one of those guests who could blow up The Tonight Show in a heartbeat. The Oscar winner would bulldoze over Johnny's questions, change topics mid-sentence, and steal the spotlight with wild antics. On one notorious night, she removed her shoe and handed it to Carson live on air, leaving Johnny speechless, and more than a little ticked off. Winters' boldness and unpredictability made for unpredictable television, but also frayed Johnny's nerves. He liked controlled chaos, not outright mutiny. Off-air, he reportedly dreaded her appearances, knowing that any attempt to guide the interview could end in disaster, or at least utter exhaustion. Winters' anything-goes style clashed hard with Carson's more reserved, controlled approach. For all her talent, she's remembered as one of the guests Johnny would have gladly swapped for an empty chair or a punching bag. Norman Mailer. Every talk show needs a little controversy, but Norman Mailer delivered it in spades. The celebrated author loved nothing more than an argument and would happily hijack The Tonight Show to prove it. Mailer sparred with Johnny, challenged his jokes, and launched into long-winded debates about politics, culture, or gender. Carson, whose own brand was breezy charm, found Mailer's confrontational style exhausting. On nights when Mailer was on the schedule, Carson would brace himself for fireworks. Mailer's ego, intensity, and refusal to play along with the show's rhythm made him the ultimate anti-guest, a man who treated every appearance as a duel. For Johnny, it was like stepping into the ring with a heavyweight who didn't know when to quit. There's little doubt Mailer made Johnny want to throw more than just questions his way. Zsa Gabber, Zsa Gabber, queen of glamour and drama, was the Tonight Show's ultimate scene stealer. Gabber dominated conversations, dropped names, and spun endless tales about her wealth, marriages, and wild social life. Her constant self-promotion and flirtatious banter hijacked the flow of the show, forcing Johnny into the role of passive audience. Carson, who loved witty back and forth, found himself steamrolled. Gabber's lack of self-awareness and inability to take a joke meant Johnny's legendary quips landed with a thud. Off camera, he complained about her diva antics, and on camera, you could see the strain behind the smile. Gabber wasn't just hard to interview, she was impossible to control. For Johnny, every appearance was a masterclass in patience and a secret exercise in anger management. Harry Bellfonte. Harry Bellfonte, singer, actor, and activist, brought serious weight to every Tonight Show appearance, sometimes a little too much. Where most guests plugged movies or swapped stories, Bellfonte plunged headfirst into civil rights, politics, and injustice. While Carson respected Bellfonte's convictions, he bristled at having his comedy hour turned into a platform for activism. Johnny thrived on laughter, not lectures. The shift in tone left him struggling to inject humor, and left audiences unsure whether to applaud or change the channel. Behind the scenes, Carson griped about guests who couldn't keep it light. As much as he respected Bellfonte, Carson dreaded the mood shift his appearances brought. The tension was never personal, but it was palpable. Some nights, Johnny would have given anything for a simple song and dance. George Carlin. George Carlin's early visits to The Tonight Show were relatively tame, but as his comedy grew edgier, the friction with Johnny grew. Carlin's irreverence, biting social satire, and willingness to skewer sacred cows made him a hot ticket for younger viewers, but a liability for Carson, who built his empire on mainstream appeal. As Carlin's routines grew bolder, Johnny pulled back. He worried about language, boundaries, and the risk of live TV disasters. Carlin's refusal to play by the Tonight Show rules, sometimes ignoring cues, sometimes launching into off-color rants, left Johnny sweating. The show needed laughs, not controversy. Carson respected Carlin's genius, but as time went on, he preferred to keep that genius at arm's length. Don Rickles. Don Rickles was a Tonight Show legend, beloved by audiences and feared by hosts. Rickles' rapid-fire, no-holds-barred insult comedy targeted everyone, Carson included. Johnny played along, but sometimes Rickles pushed too far, skewering Carson with jokes that blurred the line between roast and roast beef. On more than one occasion, Rickles hijacked the show, getting up from his seat, mocking crew members, and even breaking Johnny's prized desk cigarette box. Their legendary on-air confrontation became one for the books. Carson barging onto the set of Rickles' own show, fuming and barely hiding his annoyance. The truth. Carson admired Rickles, but there were nights when the king of late night wanted nothing more than to shut Rickles up with a punchline or a punch. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis, silver screen heartthrob and Hollywood bad boy, brought wild energy to every Tonight Show visit, sometimes a little too wild. Curtis monopolized the spotlight, delivering endless Hollywood stories and off-color anecdotes that often drowned out Johnny's carefully crafted rhythm. The interviews could swing from hilarious to chaotic in seconds, leaving Carson scrambling to regain control. Curtis's outsized personality and flair for the dramatic made him a showman, but one who often played by his own rules. Carson, who preferred guests willing to share the stage, found himself exhausted after every Curtis appearance. If there was ever a guest Johnny wished he could cut to commercial on for real, it was Curtis at full tilt. Tom Snyder. Tom Snyder, fellow late-night host and master interviewer, came to The Tonight Show with one goal: dominate the conversation. Snyder's brashness, habit of talking over Carson, and penchant for plugging his own show left Johnny visibly annoyed. Snyder treated every guest spot like a takeover, disregarding Carson's questions and making it about himself. Behind the scenes, Carson reportedly saw Snyder as a professional rival. The interviews felt less like banter and more like a power struggle. Carson worked hard to steer things back, but Snyder kept grabbing the wheel. By the end of each segment, Johnny was ready for him to return to his own set and stay there. Bette Midler. To millions, Bette Midler's Tonight Show appearances are the stuff of television legend. Her emotional performance during Carson's penultimate episode brought Johnny to tears. But behind the scenes, Midler's larger-than-life personality and unwavering confidence could be overwhelming, even for the king of late night. Midler was a whirlwind, bold, loud, unapologetically herself. While Carson admired her artistry, her assertiveness could throw his well-ordered set into beautiful chaos. Midler wasn't content to simply answer questions or banter politely. She seized the spotlight, sometimes even turning the tables on Johnny with her own sharp humor. For a host who liked to keep a firm grip on the reins, it was both exhilarating and exhausting. Off-camera, Midler hinted that Carson's cool Midwestern reserve was often no match for her Broadway bravado. Their chemistry was real, but so was the friction. Carson respected her, but in his more candid moments, he reportedly admitted that Midler's energy could leave him feeling steamrolled. If Johnny ever wanted to punch a guest just to regain control, it was during the hurricane known as Bette Midler. So after all the chaos and comedy, one thing's certain, even Johnny Carson had his breaking point. Which Tonight Show guest would you have wanted to punch or just see squirm? Share your pick in the comments, tell us your wildest late-night memories, and hit subscribe for more untold stories. Behind every joke, there's a backstage battle you never see.